This podcast is co-created and co-produced by the Food Allergy Institute and the 12 Company. Listeners should know that the podcast host, Lesley-Anne Stone, is not a physician nor a licensed medical professional, and the purpose of this podcast is strictly limited to storytelling. Any content shared within the podcast is not intended to be medical advice and should not be used for diagnosis or treatment purposes. All listeners are urged to consult their healthcare providers. The creators, hosts, and guests of this podcast are not liable for any decisions or actions taken by any persons who claim to rely upon the content of this podcast. Hi, I'm Lesley-Anne Stone, and this is Resilience and Hope, a Food Allergy Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a very special guest, somebody who is so near and dear to my heart, my dear friend, Herman Sandhu. Welcome, Herman.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, so let's start with who is Herman? What do you do today?
Sure.
At the Food Allergy Institute? What is your role today?
So my title on paper is Senior Software Manager in Data Informatics. So I oversee all the development of systems that we are trying to integrate and replace other systems that we utilize. I oversee all of the data science, applied mathematics teams that we utilize to actually deliver tolerance induction, and then building our machine learning and AI algorithms and integrating that into all processes.
A lot to take in. We will get to all of that and unpack that in a moment.
All right.
But first, let's talk about how we met and how we connected.
Yeah.
So we met in 2016 when Sam first started treatment with the Food Allergy Institute many years ago in a different office.
Very different.
And you had a very different role.
Yes.
Well, let's start with the biggie is you are Dr. Randhawa's nephew.
Yes, I am.
You are his nephew. And when I met you, the Tolerance Induction Program was Dr. Randhawa, you, and a receptionist.
Yep.
And there was no massive clinic. There was no 300 employees. It was just the three of you. And we spent a lot of time together.
Yes, we did.
Because you were there for every appointment, sitting right next to me and Sam.
Yep.
Literally holding my hand through this. And today, if you're in the program, the facility in the clinic is amazing. And you guys would say, we're going to have this whole facility with this clinic, and there's going to be an exercise room, and there's going to be a lab on site, and a kitchen in-house, and all of these things. And people say that they're going to do things, but they don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You had the vision, and you guys did it.
Yeah.
You did it. So let's go back and talk about your early days with Dr. Randhawa and how your career started. Let's actually go way back to, if you're willing to do this with me, to your education, because your story is amazing.
Yeah.
So before coming to Dr. Randhawa to work with him, he's obviously your relative, but let's talk about your education. Who is Herman?
I've had a lot of unique experiences growing up, and I think one that really shaped me early on was I was lucky enough to work in a lab that was sequencing DNA, different species of animals. And so I happened to be working on a project where they had gone out to Malaysia and they had potentially discovered a new gecko species. And so I got to participate in the sequencing of that gecko species DNA. Lo and behold, it was a new species that was not discovered at that time. And so I have like a little footnote in a National Geographic publication from a long time ago. And then
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And how old were you?
I was 13 or 14 at that time.
Yeah, that's not normal. You realize that, right?
Now I do.
So that's how things started.
That's how things started.
That's just how things started.
I started to take college courses when I was 16. I was focused in pre-med and nanotechnology. I wrote a paper in high school.
Wait, what is nanotechnology?
Think of it as little machines and robots that you can't see with the naked eye. I was very interested at that time in gold nanoparticles and
Wait, you're going, what is a golden nanoparticle?
so it's literally like a bot that is built out of gold, and at that time I had written a paper about how they were utilizing gold nanoparticles to try and target cancer cells, and actually instead of chemotherapy and radiation where it kind of attacks your entire body, it was very much like, all right, we will navigate these bots to where the cancer cells are, engulf it, and try and heat it up from there. And so that was one of my interests. I was also interested in biology, so I was pre-med at that time, double majored, but then I was young. I wasn't really,
You
I
were
think
16.
yes, I was 16. Was not ready for what was needed out of me to really go through college. I've never been great at the traditional schooling system to, be serious about college, and I was just young. I wanted
You were a
to
kid.
explore and kind of just see what else was out there, and so I dropped out when I was 18, 17, 18, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had gone and I was working at 7-Eleven, which that job helped me really just see kind of other aspects of life. I grew up in a very kind of sheltered and protected manner, and so working there helped me break out of my shell.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was really kind of where I discovered I enjoyed helping people. I mean, I remember that there were a family of like 3 girls that would just come to the store every day, and they had their own struggles, but the youngest one, I always saw like a school book in her hand, and so one day I'd asked her like what she was studying, and she was studying math, and so she actually would come after school and sit behind the counter, and we would just kind of work through her problems together. And so I really kind of developed a passion of wanting to help from there. I had gone and gotten my license in phlebotomy, which was kind of like a quick program, but didn't really enjoy having to stick people all day. In a span of a week, I was actually robbed at the store
Oh my
twice in
gosh.
1 week, and so from there, Dr. Randhawa, being my uncle, had heard about what was going on, and he just so happened that the assistant that was working with him at that time was getting ready to leave, and he had offered me the job, and I'd actually initially said no. I was like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't really want to have to drive out to Long Beach and go work there. And kudos to my dad. My dad was like, "You're taking that job from me," like, and from there, everything else. I mean, my entire life kind of changed after that. And
What year was that?
2011.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was Dr. Randhawa doing at the time? Because that was before the Food Allergy Institute.
It was before the Food Allergy Institute had a name, but he was already doing this work. I mean, I really actually started in one of his private clinics, it was what TPIRC became.
So let's pause for a minute. TPIRC, Translational, Pulmonary, Immunology Research Center.
Yep.
TPIRC. And what is TPIRC?
To me, TPIRC was a concept of how we could change the way healthcare operates. If you look, there's kind of 3 major aspects of healthcare. You have your clinicians, you have your researchers, and you have your advocacy groups. And obviously, just working in the field with Dr. Randhawa, I saw that nobody's talking with each other, right? Clinicians are doing their thing on this side. Researchers are kind of diving into problems. And then maybe 10 years down the line, what they're working on will be applied to the clinicians. And really, the mission of TPIRC was taking rare and orphan conditions that have not seen any forward progress in regards to treatment, new diagnoses, new diagnostics, and really saying, okay, how do we blend those 3 aspects together and drive something forward? And so I was working with patients that had, conditions like EDS, POTS, trying to help people navigate a system that was not there to actually serve them.
And TPIRC is still around today.
Yeah.
It is still very much part of the operation here at the Food Allergy Institute.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think at the heart of FAI is TPIRC, right? It is bringing the research, the clinical side, and the advocacy side all together. So, all of the data that we're collecting from the clinical side feeds right into the research side. When there is a new discovery, that discovery gets reapplied right into the clinical side of what's going on. And then obviously the advocacy side of pushing awareness and trying to get things to change around all of it.
Right. Okay, so let's go back. 2011,
Mhm.
you go work for Dr. Randhawa at TPIRC. And what are you doing there?
So when I first started, I really kind of was functioning as a medical receptionist, a bit of like a medical assistant. You know, if you ever talk to any of the early patients that I ever met, they were all like going up to Dr. Manawa and saying, "Why'd you hire this kid?" I was nervous. I couldn't really talk to patients. I would kind of just like put him in the room and say, "He's coming," and then I'd be gone. And Dr. Manawa was notorious for being late to clinical appointments because he's just doing so much, seeing so many different types of patients. And so ultimately I had to learn how to interact, and it really had a big impact on me. The type of patients that we were seeing there were patients that we were seeing on a weekly basis every 2 weeks. And it goes from refilling medications to helping medications get approved through insurance for off-label use. There are medications that were known to improve a disease state, but because it is not actually indicated, you couldn't get that medication,
Oh,
which was,
wow.
baffling to me. And so I had to learn how to advocate for my patients. I had to learn how to navigate the system to make sure that they, got what they did. And I'm blessed for that experience. I got to see a patient that was wheelchair bound and on oxygen 24/7. And, through working with Dr. Mandawa, I mean, she's, living a completely normal life, walking around,
Oh, my
went to
gosh.
college. And, I had another family that, out of respect, I won't mention their name, but she was somebody from the age of 8 until, she passed away at the age of 14 that just had a massive impact on me. I mean, she was such a young person, but an old soul, and somebody that was fighting every single day and never lost hope of, what she wanted to do. And that had an impact on me and really shaped my drive to make sure that I could do anything and everything in my power to for these patients, but also to the ultimate vision of what Dr. Manawa had of changing the system.
Well, that is a beautiful thing
Yeah.
that you've talked to me about this patient
Yep.
in particular, and it is quite moving.
Yeah. I come from a background of people that worked in healthcare. My mom has cerebral palsy. So, I'm familiar with kind of complex diseases, but that was the first patient that I ever worked with that I experienced that type of loss.
Mm,
And that loss, I mean, drives me to this day.
mm,
It's been very impactful.
mm. It's beautiful. Hard to follow up with a question after this, but I will. Tell me about moving into those infancy days of what is now the Food Allergy Institute. I understand you were always doing this line of work, but talk to me about when you moved into Miller's and you
Yeah.
were working, I understand, in the basement. Talk to me about that.
Obviously, Dr. Nawat had already been working on developing what is FAI now, but probably 2013, I started to help out more on what would become FAI. So it was myself, Dr. Manawa, and we had a nurse at that time named Brandy, I mean, who was phenomenal and really helped lay the foundation of what would become what it is now. And, at that time, my role was all over the place, from helping get patients into the door, helping prepare their skin tests. Fun fact, I was anaphylactic to seafood and shellfish, and I'd be reacting while I'm skin testing a kid to this stuff.
Uh,
And Dr. Now was like, "Man, you're like the worst representation of what I'm trying to do here." Skin testing to preparing food lab, or it wasn't even food lab at that time, but preparing the doses that families would go home with. Like, you're familiar with the salsa cups and
mm-hmm.
trying to scrape out these little specks of food, but preparing 5 milligrams, 2.5 milligrams of any given food for hundreds of patients. And then really, what has now become the command center was Dr. Nawa and myself for years on end. I mean, I was on call for, I don't know, 5, 6 years, like 24/7. Patients, when there was an emergency, somebody needed to answer the phone, make sure that they were stabilized, and then, how do we course correct? Then there's even like the enrollment side of, we used to have this notepad that I just had written patients' names down or family names that had called and expressed interest in coming in. And I used to host these Saturday calls where I would really for like 2 hours just kind of explain the program, how it worked, what to expect, and then just answer any questions that they had.
Unbelievable. So the transition from the basement of Miller's to that initial clinic when I met you,
Mm-hmm.
giving me my little salsa cup of minuscule, whatever that nut was. I
Yep.
remember I would have Sam like lick it
Yep.
to get everything out. And then we didn't have a gym
Mm-hmm.
at the time. So you would run Sam up and down the hall
Yeah.
to get his heart rate up when you had to exercise after a dosing. I remember it, and you had such amazing bedside manner with me because I was so anxious. I remember the first time meeting you in that first appointment, which was hours long, and surrendering to you and Dr. Randhawa. And you were so kind to me. You just put me at ease. I'll never forget. And you were so good to Sam. You were like a big brother figure to Sam. He was always comfortable around you. And when we graduated, when we went into remission, you were there. I'm going to get emotional thinking about it. But I remember you gave Sam a gift. He remembers it to this day. I mean, It was so sweet. And I had to have you on this show because if we're going to talk about our journey through the Tolerance Induction Program, you are the cornerstone of it, honestly. I mean, you really are there.
Yeah.
So it's been neat to see you go to where you are today. So let's talk about today. Massive operation, 300 employees, different locations throughout California. And you have this very fancy title that I can't say what it is because it's so long and so detailed and technical that in layman's terms, I can't even say what it is.
We just build things.
You build these amazing information systems, an AI system, an AI. So let's talk about AI because we had a conversation offline about AI.
Yep.
Talk to me about what is we're going to talk about AI in different ways, but talk to me about the AI that is involved in the Tolerance Induction Program, this system that you built, this massive system.
Sure. Where do I start? I mean, I think when we look at AI has obviously, really become kind of like a buzz term over the last few years. You've had, ChatGPT, all these other systems that built large language models. I think it's important to remember that, the concept of AI has really been around since the 50s. That's really when the term was first coined. Yeah.
Huh.
And if you look at the core of what AI is, it is how does software replicate human activity, decision making, and so on. Look at like Google Maps. Google Maps has been around for a long time, and you're going to enter your destination, and then it's going to, through its database, figure out, okay, what are all the options of how do we get to this place from where you're located right now? Then on top of that, it's going to overlay data that it's collected from satellite and say, okay, if you leave at 8 a.m., typically there's this amount of traffic. So we're going to anticipate that and put that into the algorithm. And then you have like the live data that when users are reporting accidents or obstructions, that's all now in real time kind of adjusting, okay, maybe you need to exit off and take this route. And very, I don't want to say very similar, but, conceptually, that's what Dr. Randhawa started to design a long time ago that we've now continued to build out. So, we understand that, all right, a family is coming in and they're allergic to peanut and they're allergic to cashew and walnut. So we understand where they're starting. And now we need to define how they get to food freedom. And so, a lot of his initial work around actually sequencing the proteins in plant and mammalian proteins to understand, okay, when the body sees birch, for example, that actually also similarly looks like peanut in some context, right? In some amount. And so, now we're able to ingest all this data that we collect from the initial visit, blood testing, skin testing, patch testing, ingest that into the system, and the system will now say, okay, here's where you're starting. Here are all the steps that need to be taken to get you to food freedom. Literally visit by visit, we are saying, all right, you're going to touch this food, then this food, and this food, and the exact amounts that you're going to need to get to that. Ultimately, what we've been able to do is really it's applied mathematics. So you're taking these complex systems, complex data points, and mathematically understanding how it all ties together. So how long is it going to take a child consuming 3 grams of almond to start to turn off some of the receptors towards peanut? how long will it take us before we can actually safely introduce peanut? And I think, something that you will not get anywhere else in the disease space of food allergies is what amount of a food will trigger what grade of anaphylaxis. So, you started before we started to release these visual diagrams that we call snapshots. So a visual representation of how allergic your child is to any given allergen. Now, through AI, through applied mathematics and machine learning, we can actually predict that, which I think is awesome.
It's fascinating. So Sam and other kids who graduated years ago are all in this system. So you're saying that every kid that passes through Food Allergy Institute, the graduates, the 8,000 plus kids who've graduated this program, living in life and food freedom, that just keeps training the AI.
It continues to power what we do, make us more efficient in how we approach any given case. You contributed to the next kid's treatment plan and so on.
You're helping the greater good.
You're helping the greater good.
By being in the program.
Yep.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So talk about this model now. You have this AI, you have this system. What is the plan for the future?
I mean, I think for us, expansion has always been very important. We understand the burden of having to travel here. I mean, that fact is not lost upon us. And we could have expanded much faster, years ago, but really what I think would have been sacrificed was patient safety. And that was not something we were ever willing to compromise on. I mean, this is a scary disease state. When a child goes into anaphylaxis, I've experienced anaphylaxis, it's a very scary thing. And so to sacrifice that was not something we were willing to do. Ultimately, now with the systems that we've built, we will be able to start to allow the other groups of physicians to actually kind of get trained by us.
Wow.
And ultimately allow the system to drive the clinical care instead of us. It's something 10 years ago, I think Dr. Randhawa really was, set on, okay, we need to get an allergist into here and that will allow us to expand. But ultimately, and I mean, no offense by this, but clinicians are not trained mathematicians. They are not data scientists. So trying to explain an algorithm to a clinician doesn't make sense. But now we've built the system that now just actually dictates, hey, here's how you're going to go. And I mean, we've achieved very high success rates in regards to what we're predicting and then what the actual outcome is. We study that. And I think it's important to understand that it's all still human operated, meaning we're not just letting AI run rampant and make all decisions. Like, yes, it makes the work more efficient. It makes taking all that data and analyzing it much more efficient, but ultimately there are still highly trained individuals that will make the ultimate choice of what's going to happen or not.
Mm-hmm.
And we even study that, right? When a physician is changing what was predicted, we're going to study why that was changed. How did that actually impact the care? Did it help? Was the algorithm wrong? That's what we study.
Let's go back to TPIRC for a second. With this AI system and this model, could this be implemented in other orphan diseases? Is that something that you want to start to look at?
Yeah, I would love to. My passion is in the space of rare disease. And I think the approach that we have applied to, food allergies, and Dr. Randhawa has already applied this approach to other conditions, really can start to impact how we start to study other diseases. And I would love to be able to get back into that soon enough.
Amazing. Amazing. So you have seen everything with the Food Allergy Institute, from those early stages, the basement of the hospital, being in the clinic, and now being at the helm of the data science and the AI in the future. What would you say to families out there, food allergy families who are considering the program? What do you say to those people?
I think first I would say we understand the burden of the disease. It is a heavy cost on the child. It's a heavy cost on the family. And, it's an entire structure built around fear and anxiety. And that's no way to live. And I think that a lot of families really feel like treatment is riskier than avoidance. But avoidance hasn't helped food allergies get better. I mean, more often than not, you're seeing it get worse over time.
You're right.
And I think that families should expect and allow us to take on that burden. Take on the burden of studying the disease, take on the burden of designing systems to help these families. And ultimately, we want to remove the guesswork. We have removed the guesswork out of how we treat food allergies. I tell people that seeing a child graduate from the program is amazing. It's to me, when I was really involved in the clinic, it was family. So seeing family get these successes and wins. But what really drove me was seeing the parents. When you see a parent's shoulders finally drop, you see them finally relax after, 3, 10, 15 years of that type of life. I mean, nothing brought me greater motivation than seeing that.
The most amazing work.
Yep.
You're amazing. You're amazing. Thank you for everything that you're doing for this community and the future of other diseases out there, these orphan diseases. I didn't really understand what that term meant until I met you and you were explaining it to me, and it's incredible. And I've, through the years, met people involved in TPIRC and the philanthropy work that TPIRC does, and it's really an incredible business model that I feel very honored to be able to support and be a part of in this little small way.
Something needed to change, right? You can't have the third largest part of the US economy also be the slowest moving in regards to innovation. Something has to change, and that's what we're doing.
Oh, amazing. Herman, you've said to me that you describe the Food Allergy Institute as a technology company. Technology company.
Yep.
Explain.
Yeah, to me, I think more often than not, we get boxed into, oh, they're just a clinical care center. But ultimately, the reason I describe us as a technology company is we have integrated and built algorithms and systems that directly dictate how a patient is going to be treated. You don't see that anywhere else. I have high cholesterol. When I go to my physician to say, all right, how do we go about treating this? They're not going to tell me in a year or in 6 months on this dose, your cholesterol is going to drop by that much. And so, for us to have collected as much data as we have and studied it and actually designed systems and technology to help predict and ultimately help patients reach remission or food freedom is what defines us as a technology company.
Fascinating. I really admire what you do. I admire you as a person, what you do, the whole package, Herman, the whole package.
I appreciate it. 9 years of knowing you has always been a blessing. I mean, I know if I ever have anything going on, I can reach out to you.
Always.
And I mean, you're one of the few people that actually have my private cell phone.
I know. I don't abuse it. That's why I said when you gave it to me, I'm like, I'm not going to abuse this.
No, you don't. But I mean, truly, we've just become friends and family. And like I said, I mean, when I was really involved in the clinical side, every patient was family to me and making sure that they got to where they needed to get to. And being outside of the clinical, everybody is still family to me, but my mission of making sure that this gets to the millions and millions of children and ultimately adults actually is very important to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, the listener, for joining us today on this episode of Resilience and Hope, a Food Allergy Podcast. We have an email address and we want to hear from you. resilienceandhopepodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, ideas for future episodes, please write us. And follow us on social media @Resilience and Hope Podcast. Please give us 5 stars. 5 stars. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. 5 stars will help other listeners out there in the podcast space find us. And we want more listeners. So thank you. And until next time, I'm Lesley-Anne Stone. Resilience and Hope Podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the Food Allergy Institute.